The Maiden of the Forest by pumpkinmoose22. Chapter 14. Sure enough, the entire palace staff stood at the bottom of the castle steps when they arrived. Ella seemed to shake involuntarily beside Kit, and he wondered how hard this must be for her. Surely her life was about to make a massive, drastic turn, for the better in the long run, but for now it was probably absolutely daunting. Kit kissed her temple and squeezed her hand. "Don't worry, my darling," he soothed. "Just remember to be you, no matter what." She swallowed with difficulty, nodding her head. Kit smiled, and the carriage came to a stop, and the footman opened the door, only to have Mr. Goose nearly attack him as he launched out of the enclosed space. Ella giggled. He has never been fond of carriages. Kit chuckled. Apparently not. The last thing the palace staff had been expecting was a goose to come flying out of the royal carriage. "What on earth?" Prudence muttered, bewildered as well as slightly appalled. She didn't have time to say more, however, for the king had just exited the carriage. The staff straightened and put on their best performance, for they were about to see their future queen for the first time. Anticipation and nerves made all of them twitch involuntarily. Kit held out his hand and Ella took it, slowly stepping out of the carriage with her box resting under her arm against her hip. If the staff thought the goose was a surprise, the sight of what was obviously a servant girl holding onto their king's hand left them speechless. But what was the most shocking thing was the look of utter adoration on the king's face. In that instant, all could see that he loved everything about this woman. And if he, being a good man and a great judge of character, loved her, then why shouldn't they give her a chance? Prudence stepped forward and curtsied, being the first to introduce herself. "Welcome home, your majesty," she said before straightening. "I should say you gave us all quite the scare when you magically disappeared yesterday." Kit rubbed the back of his neck. "Ah, yes. I apologize for that again. Ella, allow me to introduce you to Prudence, the royal housekeeper." Ella smiled warmly at Prudence before curtsying to her. "It is a pleasure to meet you, madam. You must be a very strong woman in order to have such an honourable title." Prudence was surprised, but pleased by the compliment. "Thank you, miss," she replied. Ella looked past Prudence to the other members of the staff. "Who are the others in your charming company?" Prudence glanced over her shoulder. "These are the other members of staff who help keep the castle running, my lady. You will get to know them over time." Ella frowned. "Can't I get to know them now? I will feel quite at ease at being at least introduced to them." Kit smiled adoringly at her. This was his Ella, displaying the importance of knowing others not as faces but as people. Prudence didn't know what to say, so Kit intervened. "If you would like to meet them, my darling, I'll gladly introduce you." Ella's smile was enchanting as she nodded happily. "Please, if it isn't too much trouble." Surprising everyone, Kit kissed her openly on the cheek. "It is no trouble at all. But I must say they can be a bit of a bore." Ella let out an unrestrained laugh, and all within hearing of it melted from the pure sound. She lightly swatted Kit's arm. "Be kind, Mr. Kit." "Forgive me, my lady," Kit laughed in return. The next half hour was spent by making personal introductions to the rest of the staff, from the head butler, Octavius, to the cook, Maurice. Ella fascinated all of them by not only getting their names, but asking a couple of questions. And they weren't the typical questions one would ask. She inquired about favourite colours, what children's stories they found appealing, whether they preferred rainy days or sunny, what their favourite kind of dessert was. By the time they had gotten down the line, every member of the staff was smitten by her. "It was a pleasure meeting you all," Ella said, curtsying to them. "I look forward to deepening friendships over time." They all smiled as they bowed and curtsied back. Kit leaned into her ear. "You have them all completely under your spell, you know." "Whatever do you mean?" she asked curiously. Kit squeezed her hand. "What I mean is that they completely adore you." Ella slightly blushed. "I am glad to hear it." Prudence cleared her throat. "Your Majesty, now that you have returned with your future bride, how would you like to celebrate?" Kit glanced at Ella, and noticed that she appeared to be even more exhausted than before. He knew the others were eager to celebrate, and a party they would have. but tonight he would stick by his promise and give Ella a fairly relaxed evening. "It has been a rather trying day," he said loudly so all would hear. "For tonight I would request a private evening with my bride-to-be, and tomorrow we will discuss preparations for a celebration." "Of course, Your Highness," Prudence replied, while the staff tried to hide their disappointment at having to wait, but they were willing to do so, for they trusted the king had his reasons for postponing any kind of party. "What would you like to do for this evening?" "Dinner for two, just for the two of us, would be fine, Prudence. And nothing heavy, if you please, Maurice." The cook nodded. "And I'd like for the Lady Ella to be shown her private quarters, the ones adjacent to the king's chambers." "It shall be done, Your Majesty." Kit turned to Ella, clasping his hands. "My darling, will you be all right going with Prudence? I promise she'll take good care of you, and return you to me as soon as I complete some state business." Ella smiled, squaring her shoulders, and took a deep breath. Kit realized she was gathering her courage. "I should be fine," she replied in a steady voice. Could my friends come with me?" Kit glanced at Mr. Goose, who was currently wandering around in the grass near where Galahad was happily grazing. "I think that would be fine, with the exception of Galahad." Ella laughed. "I quite agree. Besides, he prefers stables to castles." Kit grinned. "Prudence, see that Lady Ella's horse is given the best stable we have to offer, and kindly allow her friends to accompany her to her chambers." "Her friends, Your Grace?" Prudence asked. Kit smiled. "Yes, Prudence, her friends. Mr. Goose, Mr. Lizard, and the mice." "Mice!" Prudence cried in dismay. "Don't worry," Alice said hastily. "They will be on their best behaviour, I promise." "We know they will be," Kit assured her. "Don't we, Prudence?" Prudence wanted to argue, but the look in the king's eye caused her to swallow her words. "Yes, Your Majesty," she replied. "Come along, my lady. Everyone, back to your duties." As the staff rushed off, Ella glanced at Kit, who squeezed her hand. "I'll see you soon," he promised. "All right," she whispered before taking another deep breath and following Prudence into the castle. Mr. Goose ran after her while Galahad continued to graze, giving Kit the suspicion that the animals had been paying close attention to the conversation all along. They really were the most unique creatures he had ever come across. Kit watched Ella until she disappeared from his view. A sigh escaped him. "Well, that went well," Captain Alistair said right behind him, causing Kit to jump. "Alistair, don't sneak up on me," he reprimanded. "Apologies, Your Majesty," he replied with a small chuckle. "What do you think of her?" Kit asked. "She is definitely enchanting," the captain supplied. "From what I see, I'd say she will be a great queen." Kit grinned. "Of that, I have no doubt." But then his smile slid from his face, as he remembered the reason why he'd asked her to go with Prudence. During the entire meeting of the staff, the Royal Guard and the Grand Duke had stayed behind him, watching the proceedings in silence. Sighing, Kit turned to Captain Alistair. "Captain, make sure Captain Ella's horse is taken care of, would you?" "Of course, sire," he said, but added in a quieter tone. "Are you sure you can handle the Grand Duke alone?" Kit sent him a sad smile. "I am king, Alistair, and treachery is one of the unfortunate things only I can deal with." Captain Alistair nodded before walking away. "Grand Duke!" Kit demanded in his most authoritative voice. The poor man nearly stumbled over himself as he came forward. "Your Majesty!" He bowed. Kit took a deep breath, a frown on his face. "Come with me. I have some private matters to discuss with you." Without a backwards glance, Kit started up the stairs, knowing that the Grand Duke wouldn't dare not to follow right behind him. Kit decided to lead him into his study, signifying that judgment would take place at a later time in the throne room. He walked around his desk and sat down. The Grand Duke remained standing. Breathing heavily, Kit gave him the best glare he could muster, but kept his voice even as he asked, "Would you mind explaining to me what happened back at the Tremaine estate?" "Your Majesty, may I first plead my case by saying I have always had this kingdom's best interests at heart?" Kit interrupted. "If that was so, you would have gone to investigate when Lady Ella's voice could be heard." The best interest of this kingdom, Grand Duke, occurs when the rulers reign with dignity, courage, and kindness. I know from the beginning that Lady Ella possessed all of these qualities, and have sought her hand with the knowledge that she would be the greatest strength of our kingdom. You, however, have taken it upon yourself to believe the best interests of this kingdom have to deal with the matters of property, money, and power. Now, this aside, I demand that you explain to me why you did not investigate when you heard Lady Ella singing. The Grand Duke bowed his head in defeat. The Lady Tremaine came to visit me the night after the proclamation was made that he would marry the girl who fit the glass slipper. She had the broken heel of the other slipper with her, and informed me that it belonged to a servant girl in her household. I wanted to spare the kingdom the embarrassment, so I conspired with the lady. She would remain silent if I consented to make her a countess and ensure her daughters would marry into wealthy families. I agreed. And what of Ella? Kit demanded, anger coursing through him over the thought that the Grand Duke was saying she was embarrassment. What was to become of her? The Grand Duke was silent for a moment before admitting. The lady told me that I could do with her as I pleased, since she was of no concern to her. Kit clenched his fists. Captain Alistair had already said the lady had claimed to be Ella's mother, but what kind of woman would make such a claim when she had tried to throw her away? Fury coursed through the young monarch, and it took a great deal of strength to keep himself calm. Am I to understand that you knew from the beginning where the mystery princess was? She isn't a princess, sire. She is a servant girl. That matters not, Kit shouted, slamming his fists against the desk. The Grand Duke recoiled. Kit took another deep breath. Ella is royalty in every right but blood. She is the future queen of this kingdom, and I will not have you speaking ill of her. Do you understand me? The Grand Duke looked broken as he nodded. Yes, sire. Kit closed his eyes and counted to 10. Courage and kindness, he reminded himself. He couldn't let his anger cloud his judgment. Grand Duke, he said in a more gentle tone, you conspired against me, defied a royal edict, and broke your word after promising you would spare no effort to find the Lady Ella. These are grave acts of treason, and require me to consider a punishment worthy of fitting of the crime. I understand, Your Majesty, the Grand Duke replied solemnly. Kit looked upon him with pity and sadness. My dear man, you have been a wise counsellor and a good friend to the crown since the first day of your employ. Many times you helped my father to solve problems and keep this kingdom from falling into ruin. What caused this betrayal? Why did you allow yourself to succumb to greed? The Grand Duke sent him a half smile, though it was a sad one. Perhaps I am not as good a man as your father first thought when he employed me, Your Majesty. I have always had the view that a kingdom flourishes upon the strength of its numbers, lands, and riches. Your father married a princess, and gained the neighbouring kingdom when that king and queen died without a son. His lands doubled after their deaths, and with that so did everything else. We gained so much, and I realised that if we were to expand through marriage again, we would become an even greater kingdom. That's why I have been, and still am, against you marrying your lady. Kit looked upon him with even greater pity. Then I am afraid that you will be disappointed in the kingdom that I envision to build, sir. I care not for expansion, but for building strength within that I already possess. I care not for money, for the things I desire cannot be bought. I care not for numbers, because the people I have are enough, and require my time and attention. Then you are a fool, the Grand Duke replied bluntly, speaking his mind. Kit smiled sadly. Perhaps I am, but you are the bigger fool, for you have no courage or kindness in your heart, and without those things you will find little to any true success in this world. If you refuse to see sense, then I must ask to be removed from this office, the Grand Duke snapped, his anger finally getting the better of him. Rather than returning that anger, Kit felt even more sorrow as he stared up at the man he thought he had known his whole life. Shaking his head, he let out a heavy sigh. I am afraid that there may be more involved than your removal from the office, Grand Duke. Then you have decided upon my sentence? He asked stiffly, attempting to keep his dignity, though the slight fear leapt from his dark eyes. Not yet, Kit replied. There is much to be determined. Until then, I am placing you under house arrest. You will not be allowed to go anywhere without an escort, and you are restricted to the palace grounds. All your communications will be monitored, and I refuse to see you again until I will send for you. You are also not allowed to be anywhere near the Lady Ella. If I should find that you have broken any of these restrictions, including the ones that are standard under house arrest, I will have you placed in the dungeon, and an even greater punishment will befall you. Am I understood? The Grand Duke breathed heavily, anger clearly written on every inch of his face. Bowing stiffly, he muttered, You are the king, and the king's word is law. Kit looked up and saw Captain Alistair at the door. Captain! Yes, sire? Please escort the Grand Duke to his chambers, and assign an armed guard to accompany him in all his doings. Afterwards, return here, for there is another matter I wish to discuss with you. Yes, your majesty. The captain bowed before he and the Grand Duke left the room. Kit let out a heavy sigh and leaned back in his chair. I really need an advisor, he muttered, rubbing his eyes. He wasn't sure how to handle this situation. As far as he knew, this was the first mistake the Grand Duke had made. He didn't want to weigh his punishment solely on one wrong deed. But what he had done was inexcusable and worthy of the greatest punishments. Pinching the bridge of his nose, Kit wondered what his father would have done in this case. Someone cleared their throat, and Kit looked up to see the captain had returned. Alistair, come in. Close the door, would you? Doing so, the captain strode into the room. Being king is harder than being a prince, Kit sighed, rubbing his face. Captain Alistair smiled sadly at him. The burden is indeed greater, but not impossible to bear, Kit. What is troubling you? What the Grand Duke has done, I cannot let it slide, Kit muttered, standing up as he began pacing. His treason requires me to consider the worst punishments, but I am unsure which one to bestow. I take it you are considering life in prison, exile, or death. Yes, Kit muttered, leaning against the wall while looking out of the window at the setting sun. And he isn't the only person I am thinking of that is in need of punishment. I assume you are thinking of our future queen's supposed family. Kit nodded. You confessed that Lady Ella was locked up in the attic, and that Lady Tremaine claimed she was her daughter. The Grand Duke just informed me the woman came to him right after the proclamation was made, with the heel of the shoe, claiming it belonged to a servant girl in her household. What kind of woman would make one daughter a servant and not the other two? It seems to me that before any kind of decision can be made, you must learn from the Lady Ella what exactly has happened in that house. There could be more crimes we were unaware of. I agree with you. Kit walked back over to his desk and sat down. I just don't understand Alistair. Ella is so good and kind. Why would they lock her away and try to keep her from me? I wish I had an answer for you, Kit, Captain Alistair replied sadly. What has happened to her has been unfortunate. And undeserved, Kit interjected. No. If there is one thing I am going to do without delay, it is make sure Ella is loved and cherished every single day. I have reason to believe she has been devoid of such compassion for a long time. It is time we remedied that. The captain smiled. I couldn't agree more, Your Majesty. Kit leaned back in his chair and nodded to himself. Right. I feel it best to wait on the sentence of the Grand Duke until I have all the information needed concerning the Tremaines. Though I trust every word Ella will tell me, for I know she will be completely honest. I want an investigation made. Captain, I want to know everything about that house and the business that has been conducted in it for the past 20 years. If there were servants there throughout that time, they can be tracked down. I wanted to hear every scrap of gossip they have concerning what happened while they were employed there. Everything there that is to know must be made known. How soon can the investigation be completed? How soon would you like, Kit? He thought a moment. Can you give it to me in a week? I think it can be arranged. I have many friends amongst the townsfolk willing to do what needs to be done. Kit nodded. Good. But this has to be performed quietly. I don't want it getting around. We will be digging into Ella's past, and the less people know of it, the better it will be for her. I don't want her to dwell on what has transpired, but be able to evolve from it, and gossip from any source would only hinder that process. Understood, Your Majesty. Captain Alistair bowed. I'll make sure the matter is kept confidential. I know that you will. Kit smiled. You're a good friend, Alistair. I'm glad to know I can trust you with what needs to be done. Like I said, Kit, I'll always be here, should you need me. The older man smiled. After dismissing the captain to start the investigation into Ella's family, Kit now found himself standing in the hallway just outside the dining room. He had been informed by a servant that Ella would meet him there within the hour, and he was positively restless to see her. She had disappeared from his sight so many times in the past that it was hard not to fear she would do so again. It was all he could do not to prevent himself from pacing as he looked at the small grandfather clock placed opposite of the dining room doors, as if to mock him. He had been waiting for almost 20 minutes. What could be keeping her? Soft footfalls were suddenly heard, and Kit twisted around. Coming towards him, draped in an elegant gown of emerald green, was an angel. Her hair had been left down in soft, loose ringlets, her face kissed with a small application of cosmetics. The sleeves of the elegant dress split open at her elbows, exposing her delicate forearms. While the bodice hugged her curves, the skirt flared out around her, the waist being decorated in little pink flowers that trickled down through the fabric, like a rain against a window. Though it was obvious she was very thin, thinner than a girl her age should be, Kit couldn't help but see how remarkably beautiful she was. Ella's cheeks were slightly flushed, and her brown eyes shifted nervously as she walked with Prudence down the hall towards him. Her lower lip was caught between her teeth, and her hands were clasped together in front of her, displaying her inner nerves. The second she caught sight of Kit, however, her shoulders relaxed. Prudence left the two of them alone, and Ella curtsied before taking Kit's offered hand. You look beautiful, he managed to say, for his thoughts were buzzing around in his head in such a way that he was having quite difficulty thinking. Ella's blush deepened. Thank you. Kit kept her hand in his as he guided her into the dining room. Several servants stood by the table, waiting for them to arrive. Each of them looked upon Ella with curiosity and approval. They had heard from the cook about how charming she was. The entire palace desired to see firsthand the woman who fit the glass slipper, and the waiters all agreed she appeared to be quite lovely. Kit held out Ella's chair for her, and she sat down graciously. Thank you, she said again as he took the seat to the right of her, behind the head of the table. He signalled for the waiters to bring over the food, and they sprung into action. I think you'll find Maurice to be an excellent cook, Kit commented as a large helping of chicken salad, soft French bread, bowls of soup were placed in front of them. Thank you, Ella said to the servants, who eyed her curiously, but inclined their heads before retreating back into the kitchens. Kit smiled. Keep it up, and the entire palace will be charmed by your kindness. Would that be such a bad thing? Ella wondered aloud, picking up a silver spoon and stirring her soup. On the contrary, Kit said, digging into his salad. The servants are beginning to become rather grumpy. I think some kindness would do them good. I suppose that the rumours are true then, she replied with a smirk. Oh, and what rumours might that be? That the king is a horrible tyrant, bent on sucking the kindness out of everyone. Kit nearly choked on a stray piece of lettuce. A tyrant, you say? He laughed after swallowing. Goodness, how dreadful. That's what I thought, Ella replied, laughing as well. Well then, since you seem to have kindness in spades, perhaps you can use some of it on the king to cure him of his tyranny. I can give it a try, she replied, but I can't work miracles. I think you can do anything you put your mind to, Ella, Kit replied. I appreciate your confidence, good sir, she blushed. For you, my darling, I have all the confidence in the world. She looked up at him, her brown eyes dancing in the firelight. Thank you. As dinner continued, Kit noticed that Ella consumed very little soup, took 2 bites from her bread, and didn't even get through half of the salad. He asked if she was full, and she assured him that she was, though it was clear she had hardly eaten anything at all. This concerned him a great deal. She was already so thin. Had she not been eating properly? Kit decided to add that to the questions he would need answers for in the near future. He didn't want to press Ella tonight, however, for he knew she was exhausted. Shall we retire for the evening? He asked after finishing his meal. Ella, who had conversed more than consumed, nodded. That would be most appreciated, Your Majesty. Kit smiled before gently chiding her. Ella, darling. She blushed. Sorry. Now that we're here at the palace, I am having a hard time adjusting to nothing but your name. What did you call me when you didn't know I was the prince? He asked. Mr. Kit, obviously. She replied as the two left the dining room to head for their private chambers. Well then, all you have to do is drop the Mr. Kit suggested with a grin. It shouldn't be too hard after some practice. I'll try, she responded. Kit took her hand and gently squeezed her rough fingers. She responded similarly while smiling. This has been such a wonderful experience, she mused as they neared their rooms. I can't even begin to believe this is real. I fear I will wake up tomorrow and be back at the manor. Kit stopped, for they had reached her door. Gently he pulled her into an embrace. My darling, this is no dream. You can sleep tonight with the full assurance that you will wake here in the morning, in the castle, and spend the rest of the entire day with me. Though I must confess there are several unfortunate things we will have to discuss, among a few curious things concerning lizards and pumpkins. And things, she put in. Kit smiled. Yes. Alice sighed. I will respond to all the questions you have, sire, but I fear you will not like the answers. I may not, but I need to hear them, Ella, he said gently. And the name is Kit, if you don't mind. She smiled sheepishly, her cheeks darkening again. I'm sorry. Kit. Kit grinned. There, the first attempt and a success. Gosh, if I'm having this much trouble with a simple name, how will I ever manage the other changes placed before me? She wondered with worry. Kit leaned forward and kissed her cheek. Don't worry, my darling. It will come, and I will help you every step of the way. An offer like that? An offer that I accept with all respect, Ella muttered. Thank you, Kit. Yes, Kit. Kit chuckled. It'll come. Now, my fair lady, I must bid you good night. He bent down and kissed the back of her hand. The morrow cannot come fast enough. Ella smiled before surprising him by leaning forward to kiss his cheek. Good night, my Kit. Kit's heart skipped a beat. The possessive word was not spoken with selfishness. It was given in sweetness, longing, and love. Kit searched her eyes for what seemed like an eternity, before cupping her cheek and kissing her lightly upon the lips. Good night, my Ella, he muttered as his thumb rubbed lovingly against her cheek. The smile she sent him made him feel like his legs were turning to jelly as she slept back, inclined her head, and disappeared behind her chamber doors, where her servants would be waiting to help her get ready for bed. Kit stood in front of her door for several minutes, his brain foggy, his smile permanently plastered to his face. It was only when the clock struck in the town, the distant chime reaching his ears, that he remembered where he was and where he needed to be. Turning around, he walked a little ways down the hall before coming to his own chambers. Henry and Lance were waiting for him. The two helped him prepare for bed, both sporting large grins, as they listened to him go on and on about how wonderful Ella was, and how happy he felt knowing she was going to spend all day with her tomorrow. The morning cannot come fast enough, he sighed after bidding his manservants good night. He looked at both of the glass slippers. the one from the search having been placed in his room by the captain shortly after they'd returned to the palace. He was going to be sure they were returned to Ella tomorrow. Smiling at the thought of his wonderful maiden, Kit turned on his side and fell asleep. End of chapter 14. Hi guys, hope you enjoyed this. Bit of drama going on with the Grand Duke and Kit basically firing him and going for the investigation with Ella's family, and Ella and Kit being lovely over dinner. The lovely little my Kit, my Ella moment, just beautiful on so many levels. Anyway, have a good day, night, or whatever time zone you're in. Bye my guys, gals and non-binary pals. I'll see you in another video. Remember to like, comment and subscribe, and hit that bell to get notified whenever I upload a new video. Bye!